What was your first Warhammer army? When I first got into Warhammer, it was with my uncle. We were trying to decide what armies we wanted to build and play. Long story short, a family member's ex had left a pile of 40K models in her basement after they broke up. Years after the fact, she gave them to us. It was mostly a mix of Space Marines and Imperial Guard. Steel Legion to be exact. My uncle took the Space Marines and, well, I decided to build Orcs because Guard was boring at the time. So my uncle ended up with the Guard too. Later on, we decided we would both work on the Guard together and make it sort of a tag team project. Later on, I found an amazing deal on a bulk lot of Guard with basically all the infantry we would need. It also had some armor in it too. Now after both of us have made several armies of our own, we're finally getting around to doing this. My uncle's done a lot of the infantry so far. I helped a little bit, but he did the brunt of the work. So now it's my turn. Today I'll be doing a heavy weapons team full of autocannons. And because of the mishmash guard models we have, there's going to be some Cadians in the mix too, but painted in the Steel Legion scheme. The build for this is pretty interesting, but we'll start with the basics. Shave the mold lines and drill out the barrels. The mold lines were kind of bad on these parts, and I've noticed that's pretty common among the old, like lighter gray GW plastic. The sandbags were by far the worst of this. Because the Steel Legion guys are old and metal, the scale is just a hair off, and they're shorter than the gun itself. So I used some smaller bases to make a little booster seat for him. There. Now he's lined up. I think building up the sandbags was the most fun part of this build process. Now I only had one actual Steel Legion spotter, which means I need to build some out of the Cadian sprue, so it's time to practice an editing trick. And bam, we have some spotters. And with that, we're ready to get some primer down and start painting. Looking back, I probably shouldn't have glued down the spotter because now I gotta get a brush in between both of those guys, but live and learn. Since we have a lot of infantry in the army, we wanted to keep the recipe simple and fast, so we're going to use a bit of contrast paint, or as my uncle calls it, cheater paints. So starting with Sagor Brown, we're going to hit the boots, the helmets, the gas masks, the backpacks, and anything else that's leather. I made a little bit of a mistake on the Legion models and got his goggles with it too, but we're going to fix that later. For the pants and bedrolls, I used the namesake Steel Legion Drab. I also used this color for the Cadian armor. I wasn't really a fan of it at first, but it really grew on me once I got the washes down and really made it pop. The harder part with this was just trying to get all of the pants. Between the spotter bunkering down and the giant gun in front of the Steel Legion guy, it was a little tricky. Again, probably should have done these in some sub-assemblies. After that, it was time for the big coat on the Steel Legion guy and the undershirt of the Cadian. For this, we're using another contrast paint in Agros Dunes. Again, like the last color, I was a bit lukewarm on this, but once we finished it up and got the wash on, it really did look a lot better. Now it's time for the metal bits. Again, simple and easy, so everything that's metal is just getting hit with some lead belcher. Canteens, gun parts, the tripod, the shovels, goggle rims, just anything that's metal. The only thing I really had an issue with was the tripod. Trying to paint around two dudes in a big pile of sandbags made this a little tricky. For the gun casing, muzzle brake, and spotter's binoculars, I used Black Legion. Unlike the last colors, I was a fan of this one right away. This is one of the newer contrast paints that goes on a lot smoother than some of the older colors in the line. It's also a lot more opaque than other contrast paints, which is really good for something like black. It gives you a nice solid layer. This is also the same color I used for the las gun on one of the Steel Legion spotters. I also hit the shells in the gun with some Hasshut copper. To finish off the base coats, I had to do the Steel Legion emblem, a white background with a black lightning bolt. I did a couple of thin layers of white in the background and lightly went over the bolt with a black. Easy enough. But what about the spotter? I don't have any decals and it's not molded into the model, so I'm going to have to freehand this. I did a couple layers of white and tried to get as close to a circle as I could, then tried freehanding a lightning bolt. It looks kinda not great. It could look worse, but let's say I'll probably get a lot of practice by the time this army's done. It took me a minute to decide on what color I wanted to use for the sandbags, but I went with Deathworld Forest. I made the first coat a little too thin, so I had to hit it with a second coat later on. It's time for washes. We'll be using 3 today. Nuln oil for the guns and metal bits, Seraphim Sepia for the coat and sleeves, and Agrax Earthshade for everything else. The Newlin oil and the Agrax are pretty standard. It makes the metal look like metal and everything else look dirty. The Seraph Sepium surprised me though. It really brought out this kind of rich light brown color in the big overcoat. After the washes, I went and hit the sandbags with a dry brush of their original color just to clean them up a bit. I got a little sloppy with the wash and it pooled a little bit too much for my liking. On to the base. Like in my last video, which you can watch here, I'll be using my glue and dunk method, but it's a bit more involved this time around. First, I'm going to get a base coat down on the base and around the rim, a nice dark brown. That way the gaps in any masing material don't look too glaring. Now we water down some PVA goo and slop it all over the base. This was a little tricky, trying to get under the gun and all in the nooks and crannies of the sandbags. Then we're going to dunk it in the sand and let it dry completely. The Steel Legion come from a planet that's just a poison desert wasteland, so we're going to go basing with sand. I'm not sure what to call this process, but I guess it's just painting dirt. So after everything is completely dry, I take some more Agrax Earthshade and run it into the base. Try not to be too rough with this, as the wetness of the wash is going to reactivate the glue a little bit, and you don't want the sand to come off. And again, after that, we're going to wait for it to dry completely. And now we take a colored dry brush at the top of the sand. I went through a few light browns, but couldn't find one that I was 100% happy with. And I ended up sticking with Deathclaw Brown, just because that's what I thought looked the best. After that dried, this would be the point where you can add some stuff like tufts or static grass. Once everything's dry and you have everything on, we're going to seal it with a final layer of PVA glue. This is going to be watered down even more than your base layer, and this will seep into the cracks and really give it a good seal so you don't have any of your basing material falling off when you go to play. And now we can get these guys varnished and call them done. I'm pretty happy with how these guys turned out, and this is going to be the first in a small video series. I wanted to start with something small to try and get a feel for the colors and general look of what we're going for, and heavy weapon teams are just really cool, I think. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you want to see more.